Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of Average Shows 3D. I'm your host Fergie, and today is our Benchy special. That's right. This is the biggest Benchy I've done. It is 300 millimeters on this X, and I had to do it in a CR10 just to make sure that I could get it that big. And as I was printing this out, and as I was showing it to my friends, I had somebody ask me a question. They said, well, of course you can print a Benchy really big, but how small can you print a Benchy? I was like, I don't know. That's a great question. So on today's episode, we'll see how low we can go with the Benchy. How small can you actually print one out? We'll go progressively from a standard 60 millimeter all the way down to 1 millimeter and see what we can get. We'll see what the performance is. Before we do that though, I'd like to go over last week's flexible print. I used a 1 millimeter nozzle on a CR10. And if you remember, this was the PLA version. Really nice and thick. Not like the other ones where when you press on it, you're afraid that the layers are going to separate. It was on vase mode, and yet because it was a 1 millimeter thick, it's 2.5 times thicker than any PLA vase that you can print out. It turned out really great. Now let's take a look at the flexible version. This is 3D Solutions Flexible Green. They sent me a sample. It wasn't a full spool, as you can tell. It was only about that much. But I printed it out as a 1 millimeter, so it's the same thickness as the other vase. So the layers really bonded great together. And that means that I can take this and crunch it up as many times as I want and just have it flex right back out. And it doesn't feel like the layers are going to separate when I do it. So it's very robust. It actually holds water, which is pretty amazing. And I'm not afraid to crunch it and not have it pop right back up into place. So this is pretty amazing. It feels very rugged, very durable, and yet very flexible, and it has a great sheen to it. It's translucent, so really happy with the results. If you ever get a chance to get a 1 millimeter nozzle from Amazon or someplace else and play with it on your printer, I highly recommend it. There's no hardware changes on your printer, just some changes in your slicer. So let's get right back. Let's get right to our Benchy here. Alright, so let's get into it. Now the Benchy has been the benchmark forever for 3D printers. The Benchy and the Marvin, a vase and a rocket were normally the first 4 things that people print on any 3D printer. And this is your standard Benchy right off the Thingiverse. It is 60 millimeters, and as you can see, looks pretty great. So let's take a look at 50. Okay, there's a 50. As you can see, it's still pretty good. All the details are nice and clear. I would have no problem with printing it out at 50 millimeters and using that as a benchmark test from the 60. Alright, let's go down to 40. Alright, here we are at 40. 40. A lot smaller, but still, I would have no problem using that as a test. There we go. It still looks pretty good. I'm not losing any of the detail here. You can still check how your layers lined up. The holes still work. It still has a pretty good arch to it. 40 is good. Now let's go down to 30. Now we're getting kind of small here. The holes are much smaller, but they're still very distinct. We use an Ender 2 for this, so of course the detail is going to be really fine on this. And you can see that we can make a pretty good Benchy at 30. How about 20? Now 20 Ooh, 20's getting kind of small now, as you can see. Zoom in. It's about as far as I can zoom in on that. I still can see the details, but they're starting to fall apart. I'm getting a little bit of stringing. The holes here aren't as distinctive or as far apart as they should. You can see that the arches aren't as sharp as they need to be, but I'll tell you, this still looks like a Benchy. So if someone handed that to you, you wouldn't have any problem recognizing it at all. What about 10? Okay, now 10 is a mess. I mean, really a mess. I don't have a macro with this camera, but if you take a look, 10 is not looking too good right now. The roof is all messed up. The smokestack never printed. The back support is not showing up on one side. It's trying though, it really is. It has some of the holes and some of the features, but wow, that does not look good. Alright, let's go with 8. How does 8 look here? Alright. 8. I would still say that you could tell it's a Benchy. The roof is blotchy. The back door supports are missing. There's no detail on the hull at all. 8 is not what I call a really great print. What about 6? Okay, 6 still has kind of a Benchy shape. I mean, come on. If you take a look at that, it still looks a little bit like a Benchy. And I guess if you had a magnifying glass, you could go through and find the features. I mean, at least it printed the hull, which is good. And then a blob of plastic on top of that. But still, we're okay. What about 4? Okay, now 4 is not looking good here. Let me come back. Let's see if I can maybe get a magnifying glass here. No, it's not even going to help. Even with a magnifying glass, it's hard to see that that's a Benchy. I can kind of make out that it's rectangular shaped, but that's about as far as I'm going to go. What about 2? Okay, here's 2. 2 is, hold on here, pretty much just a dot. You can't even focus on it. It's a round dot, like literally 1 point of filament, and that was it. What about 1? Can we get down to 1? The answer is no. The slicer wouldn't even recognize 1 as existing. It wouldn't print up a G-code to print out for 1. So that was wishful thinking, but no, there's no way that that's going to print. So here's your lineup in the Benchy Navy. It goes 60, 50, 40, 30, 20, 10, 8, 4, 2, 1. Blast off. That is our Benchy test.